Hey, thanks for joining me. I'm Erica Carlson with Bricks Real Estate, and we're talking about finding and buying foreclosures and just some things to consider. Now, there's not going to be any information here on the actual foreclosure process in Minnesota. There's plenty of information online regarding that topic, and so we're looking at this purely from a buying standpoint and just some things to be cautionary about. The big thing, if nothing else, that you take away from this, please don't spend money on a list of foreclosure homes. I had met somebody recently who told me that she was investing like a monthly, and it wasn't like a lot, like it was $4 or something like that. But hopefully that you'll understand at the end of this video that that's completely unnecessary. The other thing I want you to be cognizant of is Zillow and some other websites will produce a pre-foreclosure list. While there may be some accuracies in there, if you start knocking on people's doors that are on that list, they might be very offended and it may be pretty inaccurate. In fact, just doing some research for this video, I was running across like people saying, I've reached out to this website many times, not Zillow, a different one, and they wouldn't remove me. I've never been late on a payment. I don't understand why my address is showing up on this list. So I would stay away from that component if you're looking for pre-foreclosures. Again, I wasn't going to deep dive in that. There is kind of three things with foreclosures. There's the before and the at and the after. And what most of the people I meet are talking to me is like, really, what happens, or how do I find the houses that have gone back to the bank? So very separate category to find those people. That's like where you're talking about knocking on people's doors and presenting an offer to avoid the bank taking it over. That's a whole conversation within itself. At would be on the court steps when things go to auction. Again, a completely different conversation, not something for a new beginning, not even, I would say investor, like just regular home buyer. That's probably not for you. And so then mostly what we have access to as realtors when we look on the MLS is the ones that are back to the bank. The bank bought it at the auction because it's a lot of times the logical decision is for the bank to take it back, and then for them to put it back onto the market with a real estate agent. So that is when it becomes sort of a traditional sale. And if you're familiar with the real estate process, then it really isn't any different than purchasing any other property. So going to the finding it, I already alluded that you can get a realtor and they can give you access to that information from the MLS. There's public records that you can check into. Most states will have a list of foreclosures. What you're looking for is a list of Liz pendants, default, sheriff sales. That's definitely going to indicate to you who's in foreclosure. There are websites that specialize, but again, don't give anybody money for this. Zillow will have a list, Realty Track, Redfin are just a few that you could use. Now there's auction websites, and auctions are sort of a whole nother animal, but I don't want to keep that information from you. If you want to look into it, auction.com. Hubzu is a real website, HUBZU, will have a list of foreclosures as well. So the uniqueness of a foreclosure is just really being careful with the due diligence period. While in theory, there's some great opportunities there, you also have to, there's some obvious things, and there's some things that are going to make it challenging. So for example, things that might be missing are like the normal appliances that you would get with a sale. So don't be completely surprised if you see those things have been removed. Sometimes people are pretty angry during the foreclosure process. We have to get back to like what happened. There was a crisis oftentimes that led to this position. So in that anger, people can destroy their properties, which can be rather obvious things like maybe holes in the wall or spray paint, but then there can be things that are a little bit more beneath the surface, like missing piping or wires or things like that, where things were intentionally messed up. I mean, if you're losing the house, you're not really going to care at that point. You're not going to like vacuum as you're walking out the door kind of situation. It's going back to the bank. You don't care at that point. So understand the due diligence here is important. The problem in my experience, especially in Minnesota, because we have so many cold months, is that the banks end up winterizing the houses, and they are not going to flip the electricity on for you. They're not going to turn the water on. And so you can walk into these properties that have, number one, they might have been vacant for a very long time. So sometimes we're starting to see little creatures, little mice, insects, things like that have kind of moved in because nothing's stirring up the house. Oftentimes there is like a cleaner, but it doesn't mean it's like A++ type of cleaning. And then there'll be like tape over the toilet and the sinks and things like that because the water's not on, so they don't want you to use it. They don't want the pipes to crack and freeze. However, who knows that didn't happen before that they even got to that process. So you want to be extremely careful with properties, and they may make it very hard for you to inspect and really know what you're purchasing. And then the title search is going to be important. While that's not something you're necessarily going to do yourself, that's where the title company comes in. And of course, you still want a real estate agent to help you analyze the market and help you understand if it's fair market value. Foreclosures can sit and sit, not because of the condition, but they can be overpriced too. So make sure you're using a real estate agent to help you consider whether it's a good investment for you and it's actually a good deal. So as I said before, the buying process is pretty much the same as any other purchase of a property, because I'm not talking about auctions today. We're just talking about standard offer writing. You know, your real estate agent is going to submit an offer on your behalf. You can go below asking, but just like any other seller, the bank might not accept a below asking price, especially if they just listed the property. Don't assume just because it's bank owned that they're super desperate and they're just going to take any old offer. That is sort of a misconception, is that they are losing money. So they're going to want to break even. They're trying not to completely lose the whole thing. However, banks are not in the business of owning properties, so it's not like they want to own the property. Financing is a little bit more complicated when it comes to foreclosures. I think that people get there's a lot of misunderstanding about which type of financing is going to work. You really have to sort of anticipate it being a cash deal. Some of the more specialized loan programs may not work very well, like FHA and VA. That could be more tied into the condition of the property more than like what the REO or the bank is going to accept, because if the house is in really rough condition, it might be leaning towards a renovation loan, and then with the foreclosure process on top of it, it might just not be a great fit for you if that's the route you're taking. This is why oftentimes investors pick up these properties, because they have the cash on hand to pick up these properties, and that's why we oftentimes see them as flips. So it's a conditional issue, and there's other components. So before you request to see a foreclosure, you want to check with your agent that, in fact, your type of financing, assuming it's not cash, is going to work in this. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting your time looking at the wrong type of property. And we already talked about inspections. I mean, you can still ask for one. You can still try to negotiate with a bank. It just really kind of keep your expectations that they're probably not going to do any repairs. Now, if there was something big found in that inspection period and, you know, your agent was really able to convey something, they might reduce the price. I just have never really heard of a bank doing repairs. Again, they're just not in the business for that type of thing. And do you want them to do it anyway? Will they reduce the price? I don't know. You would have to wait and find out. And then the closing, you know, obviously the title and deed is passed to you. Now, if it's got a real estate agent, it's REO, and then you've got a real estate agent, you're probably going to get keys and things like that. But again, you're buying basically from a business, so it might not have the hand holding, type of thing. I mean, you're not getting disclosures either on the property. I think people tend to not understand that. The bank didn't live in the house, so they're going to fill out the alternative waiver, which means you're basically getting no information. And a really quick story, I can't believe I'm sharing this, is we did pick up a foreclosure. This was years ago. I'm doing an open house because we had it as a rental, and then we put it on the market to sell when we needed the cash. And as I'm doing the open house, we discovered that the neighbor popped over to introduce herself to me, and she started disclosing all this stuff about the property. One of the things was that it had suffered a fire, which of course I had no idea. You could not tell this house had suffered a fire. Now, because I'm a licensed agent and because now that became a material fact, of course I updated So I didn't have much to share on the disclosure either, but now I did have something to share because I couldn't act like I didn't know that it had suffered a fire. Again, you couldn't tell, but I was just doing the right thing by saying, upstairs had a fire. She was able to talk about it in length. It clearly had been all repaired. However, it was interesting when that house sold and that person did get an inspection. That was when I learned actually a lot more about that property, because the fire damage was now obvious in the attic, which was just an area I did not explore as an investor and a real estate agent. I just wouldn't dig around in the unfinished attic part of the house. However, the inspector did. So it did confirm that the neighbor wasn't just making up things. There really was that fire. And so I felt good about sharing what I knew, because again, foreclosures are like mystery houses. And I have friends that have purchased foreclosures, and I don't want to say it's regretful, but I do think it's a harder road to go down when it is what I call a mystery house. That is purely what it is. You're not going to be able to find out who those sellers were, what they knew, what they didn't know. You do have to accept that there's probably going to be some hidden money secrets, hopefully not a money pit, but it wouldn't be like shocking if you discovered something about the property that wasn't maybe like self-evident from just doing a walkthrough. So hopefully you learned something. I can curate just a foreclosure list or a short sale list for you. We can talk about this more, but the bottom line is they're an option. It just really comes down to financing and your risk tolerance. Will you ultimately get a great deal? Not necessarily. I think it depends on the current market of real estate. So it's 2023. It's the end of September right now. I think people call me about these because they think they're going to be, just getting some amazing deal. Does it exist? Yes. However, that might exist with any property, not necessarily a foreclosure. Thank you for making it to the end. Have a great day.